Hello, fellow orchid lovers. It's Danielle here with part 2 of our basic orchid care series. So this time we're going to talk about orchid leaves. Orchid leaves are actually incredibly important to know how your orchid is doing. So it is a subject that we really should talk about. And sometimes it actually gets overlooked. As far as our subject, our new orchid that we discussed the last time, it is in general a pretty healthy plant, and you can tell that from the leaves themselves. They're nice and firm, they're upright, they're a good color. No, buddy, you gotta get down. You gotta get down, sorry. Gotta get down. As I mentioned, I do have quite a few animals. I am a foster and I also have my own animals, so if they interrupt, I apologize. Where were we? Okay, so this is in general a healthy plant. So what are some indications or some things that could happen that might be indications of a problem? So in general, when a plant is thirsty, the leaves are going to start to droop, right? They're not going to be as upright. It's going to indicate to us that it needs a little bit of water. However, there is some leaf droop that is past the point of needing a little bit of water. And this is a good example of that. As you can see, none of the leaves are upright. They are all very soft and very droopy. This is a plant that is extremely dehydrated. Now, this is an orchid that I am currently in rescue mode with. She lost a good portion of her roots. As you can see, she is regenerating them, but there was a good period of time where she had very limited ways to hydrate herself. And so she pulled moisture from her leaves. And that's a normal process, and it's nothing really to panic about. I have several videos about rescuing Phalaenopsis orchids that you can check out. I'm not really going to go too much into it on this video because this is just basic care. But if you see the droop like this, and again, a normal leaf is going to just slightly droop. If you see a droop like this and they're really soft, it might be an indication that there's something wrong with the root system and it's not being hydrated properly. And so you're going to want to investigate. Don't just start chucking water at it because you know it's dehydrated. It's dehydrated for a reason. And usually it's something's going on in the pot. So my advice to you is if you see your orchid doing this, not the normal droop, but this kind of soft, floppy leaf, unpot it, take a look at the roots. And if you do have a situation on your hands where it has little to no roots left, please watch one of my videos about rescuing Phalaenopsis orchids, and that will help you. Don't panic. It's going to be okay. Now, some other things that you're going to possibly notice about leaves, which is going to give you an indication of what's going on, is discoloration, yellowing, and then there's another situation there that I'll share with you. So the yellowing of the leaves can be an indication of a number of things. If you're finding that a leaf higher up on the orchid is turning yellow, that's usually an indication that somehow water got into the leaf and it has caused a situation where there may be stem rot. That's one of the reasons why you have to be careful when you're watering not to get water in between the leaf joints. Because if you are in an environment that's not really hot, that water is going to have a tendency to sit there and it could cause stem rot. I also have a video about how to care for an orchid that has stem rot. I have rehabilitated several orchids that have had stem rot. And so, again, don't panic. If you see a leaf higher up on the orchid turning yellow and you pull it off and you see that there is rot underneath, please watch that video. If you can't find it, let me know in the comments and I will tag you to it. It's really good information and they can still be saved. It's not a death sentence all the time. Sometimes they don't make it, but in a general sense, even one that I thought was a goner, I managed to pull it through, so you can too. As far as yellowing like this particular plant, I put it in brighter light too suddenly and I burnt the leaves. So I actually did cut off some of it because it was really ugly. So I cut off some of it, but if you put an orchid in a new spot and you're starting to see some yellowing on the leaves, it's an indication that it's getting too much light. Phalaenopsis orchids do really like bright light, but when it's direct light, it can burn. So if you put your orchid in a spot and you notice that there's light on your leaf, go over and feel the leaf. If it's not slightly cool to the touch, if it's warm, you might be putting it in too bright of light and you might want to move it somewhere else, especially direct light. Typically Phalaenopsis orchids direct light is going to burn them. This one's under LED lights, but it was very close to the lights, and so the heat and the light just burnt it. So don't do that. If you're going to move it to brighter light, definitely do it gradually so that the orchid can adjust. Now, as far as discolored leaves are concerned, so we have this leaf right here. This leaf is the oldest leaf. So that, number one, indicates to me that it's not a problem. Older leaves do die off. It's just part of the natural life cycle of a plant. Older growth will die, and that's perfectly fine. So this leaf I am not concerned about. There's actually something in there that might be causing this to happen, but we're going to talk about that in the next video. But if you see a leaf and it's the oldest leaf and it's turning yellow, chances are it is an indication that this is just old and the plant is disposing of it because it doesn't need it anymore. Again, if it's a higher leaf, then you might need to investigate, but if it's a lower leaf, it's fine. Also, there are some Phalaenopsis orchids that grow too many leaves. Is that possible, you ask? Yes, it is. So what happens is they grow so many leaves that now it's hard for them to push through like 7 layers of leaves to get the roots out. And so the roots have a tendency to grow out from between the leaf joints, and then it becomes harder to hydrate. Additionally, it becomes harder for them to push the roots out. So they might actually end up being in a rescue situation because all of the roots are stuck behind all of those leaves. I actually had another Phalaenopsis orchid, and I did do a video about pulling those leaves off. And when I pulled those leaves off, I found so many root buds under those leaves that never had enough energy to get through all those layers of leaves. So when an orchid has a sufficient leaf system and it doesn't drop its older leaves and it starts doing this, there is nothing wrong with you pulling like 2 or 3, possibly even 4 leaves off to give the orchid less layers of leaves to go through to get their roots out, to get their spikes out. The plant is going to be fine. You do it gently, of course, because you don't want to hurt the roots. But in a general sense, if you take the leaf and you see how it has this natural split down the middle, if you rip it there and then pull it gently to the side and gently to the side, it's going to come off in relatively one piece, and the plant will be absolutely fine. So that might be something that you should consider. If your plant is starting to look like this, where it's got a million leaves and all the roots are coming out from the top, it could be an indication that there's too many leaves here and you need to get rid of a few of them, and the plant will be fine. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the leaves. Again, they are a really good barometer of how the plant is doing, so pay attention to your leaves. Leaves are gonna tell you how the plant is doing, and if you pay attention and you're really observing your plant, you're probably not gonna run into too many problems, or if the plant is having a problem, you're gonna know pretty much right away that there's an issue with the plant. So if you have any questions, certainly post them in the comment section. I hope you all are doing really well, and I will talk to you all next time.